Thank you for coming. This is especially, it's a little bit more challenging doing this. Things when we can interact and we can share with each other and so forth, and it's whatever we can do to help with that is possible. I appreciate, as I mentioned in earlier sessions, some of you perhaps were in some of my earlier sessions, but I appreciate Bob Avant including me in Alleluia this year, and almost did it last year, but hope at some point we can do something more face to face. But I'm glad that we're still doing something even in the face of coming out of our bad times. Just because I know some of you may have not been in my earlier sessions, I'll take just a second to do a quick intro. I direct the Raleigh Ringers. Been doing that since the Raleigh Ringers started in 1990. Last year was our 30th anniversary. Lots of big plans for all kinds of celebrations that we couldn't do. So we're sort of in our 31st season right now. We started rehearsing last week, rehearsing in a session. During the pandemic, we didn't do much at all. We did do a couple demo recordings for a handbell publisher, and we did that, masked and distanced. And we did a couple things for TV stations that were masked and distanced that were recorded and televised later. But really didn't do any concerts and didn't do what the Raleigh Ringers typically do. And tough on a lot of us, and I know a lot of you out there feeling that as well. But encouraged now that things have gotten back together. We are end of September. We will start, giving concerts again, and leading up to the holiday season and our own home holiday concerts. And then 2022, we will be back on we hope, knock on wood, cross fingers, that we are back on a normal year where we audition each January and run our group on a calendar year. So already planning things for next year's summer tour and so forth. So we spend a lot of time down in Texas. So the Raleigh Ringers have done tours down that way. We have always had wonderful response, and we always have plans on returning. So we just kind of try to spread out a request. The Raleigh Ringers do about 20 to 25 concerts a year. And then a few home concerts, but most of our concerts are on the road in the Northeast. Once a year, we generally in June or July, we take a week-long or 10-day tour somewhere that we can't reach on weekends that we do other times a year. And so we've done that a few times with Texas. Next year, we'll be going out to the Northeast. But what we're here to talk about today, we did a class earlier on techniques, and then we did one on starting a handbell program. And we're going to talk about rehearsals, handbell rehearsals. Some of this, of course, applies to other musical groups, but my experience in music leadership has always been in handbells. Primarily, I've done a few other things, but primarily in handbells from the leadership end. So just as kind of a disclaimer up front, I share the information about the Raleigh Ringers so you know where I'm coming from. I do, help other choirs often and do other handbell events, but my primary responsibility in handbells is with the Raleigh Ringers. So everything I say may not apply. I hope most of it does, but I've got a situation where I have extremely dedicated musicians that are borderline freaks, I guess, about handbells. So way over the top, and lots of energy, lots of excitement. And so, the way I approach things may be a little bit different than the way you approach things, but in general, I hope everything applies to what you can use. I do have a handout. I don't know, Allison, in the last couple classes, they were able to put the link to it right in the chat. I don't know if you can do that or if everybody knows how to get that anyhow, but I will follow that handout. It's it's several pages, like 4 pages long, so we have a bit to cover.
If you put
But
the link to it in the chat, then we can probably get to it.
I'm sorry?
If you put like the link to it in the chat or like a PDF of it or something, then we could probably download it.
Yeah, I don't have that link. It was what I provided to Alleluia that they got before. So maybe you can locate that. If you can throw that in there, that would be good. Anyhow, I will start out, and we'll. I think you guys can get to that link other ways too if we don't get it in the chat. No problem. So the way I have this this divided up, this discussion about rehearsals is kind of in 3 parts. Simply the things that happen before you ever get to the rehearsal, what happens at the rehearsal, and then what we can do afterwards, pretty much as soon as possible afterwards, to evaluate how that rehearsal went and make modifications for the future. We call causal analysis. Just why did things go well? Why did things not go well? And what actions can we take to make it go better next time? So we constantly want to try to, even if we have a great rehearsal, look at either continuing that or making things better. So so starting with what happens before, some of the things I have in here are the things you need to ask yourself about how you'll approach that rehearsal. How will you introduce, if there's a new piece coming out that you're presenting to the group this week, how will you introduce that piece to the group? Having some background about that piece is wonderful. And in the handbell community, composers are very accessible. And in fact, most of them love to hear from people playing their music. And if you can dig up some research about, what was behind this particular piece, was it a commission? Was it, written for a special occasion? Sometimes there's not a lot of background. Composers will tell you, I just, on a whim, wrote this piece and got it published. But more times than not, there's some background in there that they can share with you that really can help you understand what they had in mind and help your ringers, be able to portray in their part of the piece what the composer had in mind. So what you can find out can be really, really wonderful. And you can also find out, not only the background of why it was written, but how it came to be. It's kind of fun to find out that, composers don't always just sit right down and it flows right off the pen. There's pieces they pull from other ideas and that they had in the past, or they were in an especially, interesting mood that caused that part of the piece to come out. But how the piece, how the piece happened for the composer, I think is often very, very interesting. So at the Adam rehearsal, you kind of, you want to be careful that you're just not playing through music and just looking for something in the folder. Let's try this. Let's try this. Have a plan for about how much time you think you're going to spend on each piece. That looks like the right name, Allison. So good. Thank you. The handout is in the chat. But, again, you can be flexible, as I put in there too. If you're really working hard on a particular section and you think it's getting close and you want to spend extra time, why not? But have a general thought of what you want to cover, and about how much time you want to dedicate, because you could get way down deep into something that put you off your schedule and you didn't really get to another piece that you wanted to get to. So have some thoughts, even if it's really rough, some thoughts about time frame and what you want to get done. in the rehearsal, what you want to achieve. So, and communicate that to your ringers. Tonight, we're going to do, we're going to continue on this piece A, piece B that we started last week. And we're going to introduce a new piece. And then at the end of rehearsal, perhaps we're going to do a run through of pieces that we know really well. And I kind of think that's the place for that. So we'll talk about that later. But having our musicians go home with a very positive experience is helpful. That's what they remember through the week. So even if we've been working on something and woodshedding a particular part and it's not coming and we know we have to have a sectional or work on something, going home with that in mind, that we didn't succeed, that we didn't get done what we had hoped to get done, can sometimes be a downer. So I think always leaving time at the end of rehearsal to say, okay, we're going to run through. Here's a piece that's kind of a fan favorite. Most ringers will never probably find pieces that every ringer connects with, but most of our ringers really like playing this. We know it well. Confidence is there. Confidence is a huge part of what we do. Do we feel confident? Are we ready to step in front of our worship service to do this, or do we feel tentative? So if there's that piece that you feel so confident with, go home with that in mind, and be ready to dig back into the stuff you didn't quite get to where you wanted to next week, or give them some things to look at in those pieces between now and next week. In that score preparation part of my handout, it's a little, I already hit on some of these, but the kind of things that when you're looking at the music and getting ready for that rehearsal, the kind of questions that I think are important to ask yourself. What the piece is about. What did the composer want to convey? How's the piece put together? So, is it an ABA or what have you? There's a fast section at the beginning that returns at the end, and a real mellow piece part in the middle. And here's where, once you nail that part A, guess what? That last part, which is also A, is going to come anyhow. So ringers know that, what they sort of need to get under their belts is make sure you get A down, and then you'll have the final part down as well. How are the pieces that we talked about in that form tied together? Where are the tough parts? So I think you need to look at, this is where it's important. We, talking in the techniques little session we did earlier, it's important for you to understand how to play handbells, as much, if not more, than your ringers, right? Which is not always possible. I know in my case, it's never possible, because I'm blessed with some amazing musicians that have done this their whole life, and they moved to Raleigh to be in the Raleigh Ringers. And, that's why some of us, that's why we're directors, right? Because we get blown away by some of these ringers. But you need to understand, how to demonstrate the different techniques and so forth for the folks that don't know. But you also need to be able to look at the music and understand this part is going to be a bear. This is the part that we're going to spend time on, and show them initially, measure 43. Look what happens here. Look at all the bell switches based on this key change, and tempo change at the same time, where you got to watch the director. And here's going to be the part. Give them some level of warning, so we don't have a complete church get there the first time. They know that's coming, and they can be prepared, at least a little bit prepared for what might happen. We talked this morning in a techniques class. There are a set of handbell techniques that, if you played 1 year, LVs, the mallet signs, marts and so forth. But we got some obscure ones that come up less often. And sometimes we have to refer back to some of our text or our cheat sheets on, what tap pluck? What the heck was a tap pluck? I don't remember. Let me go look that up, which is fine. I mean, things you barely get to, so it's fine. But you, as the leader, and I assume that's mainly who I'm talking to today, or the director, you know, you don't need to be surprised when you get to a tap pluck and go, do any of you guys know what a tap pluck is? I mean, you're the leader, you're the person in charge. So you need to come with them and be able to say, okay, on page 5, here it is. Here's this technique. Let me show you how it works. Step behind the table and demonstrate that, and then have everybody do it, even if it's only in one part of the bells. So the more that you involve everyone, when you just isolate in a rehearsal the few people that are working on a part or a particular difficult technique or passage, you start to lose everybody else. So when we're working on a rhythm, and we'll talk about that later too, have everybody clap out the rhythm, even if it's not in your score. Someday, either in that piece or another piece, you'll have something similar, and it can only help you grow as a musician. So involving everybody, because when we don't involve them for a long period of time, they get distracted. You want them to follow along and see what you're working on with the treble bells while the bass bells are standing there. But human nature, you end up, doing other things, chatting. We'll talk about electronic devices. Hopefully, you don't even have that at the bell table with you, which would be my preference. But, if you do have it, that's the other thing people tend to do is like go check their email or go text their buddy or whatever. And we need you to pay attention and listen, be ready for what's coming up. Chances are you're going to have something like that in the future. So, all right, suggestions you have to make ringers overcome difficulties. So, you look at a quick bell switch. We run into a situation, we just had it last night at rehearsal, where, and it's interesting this year, I have one person in the group. We brought back our 2020 group. We didn't have auditions for 2021. We brought back our 2020 group, but somebody moved, somebody changed jobs and can't commit, and we've got 3 people that couldn't come back from 2020. So invited, we've never done this before. We've never had a pandemic before. I invited 2 previous Raleigh ringers back, and then another ringer that had done some demo recordings with us and I knew was very capable. So we didn't get the same opportunity to give the first of the year speeches and so forth. We were just so excited to start ringing last week. So some things we have kind of glossed over, and it's hard. So what came up last night was the speech that I usually give at the beginning of the year that says, I really appreciate when you ask for help. And people don't really understand that at first. You just went through auditions. This is kind of a little competitive, but I really want you as early as possible as a member of the Raleigh Ringers to ask for help. And that's one of my biggest challenges each year, is that when new people come in, they're used to being the star ringers in their groups, and they never ask for help because they don't have to. They're the ones providing the help, providing the extra hands to get extra bells. And so it's not natural for them. Guess what? Now you're surrounded by other folks that are like you, that are accomplished ringers, and you just went through the competitive part. From here on, there's no more competition this year. Everybody's in, everybody's at the same level, so you have nothing that, win any awards for playing the most bells, for playing the hardest passage, and so forth. So, last night I saw that new person that I mentioned, in the middle of the table with forehand in one hand, with an E and an E natural and her D5 in the other hand, and I noticed the person next to them not doing a whole lot. So I kind of had to give that speech that says, you know what? If somebody's all right, please, as soon as something requires something extra, ask around. Could you cover that for me? And again, it's sometimes not natural for some of these folks, but back to my notes, the thing that I was trying to get at is, you as a director need to try to anticipate those things. You need to look at the score before you get there and say, I think measure 21 is going to be an issue because there's 3 bells in a row for one person. We only have 2 hands, of course. And so I suggest that you give the E natural to position 4. Or in our case, and in some people's cases, if you got the luxury of that, you know, we got extra bell sets. So let's get out another E natural, and you take it here and you take it here. Done, right? So I want that a lot to come from them, but I think a first pass at that from you as the leader is very, very helpful. I hope that makes sense. Any questions, just hit them in the chat. You know, what parts in the piece do you especially want them to watch you, right? I mean, pretty much everywhere, I know, but you know, you're learning new music, you're in a rehearsal situation. You know, where are the parts where you have to watch me for a cue? Because it could vary each time. It's a tempo change, a retarded cello rondo, a cut, a something. Point those out at the beginning that I'm going to need your eyes here. I know the first couple times through you are still learning the piece and we may not connect, but eventually I'm going to need your full attention here. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's a pretty much a mandatory thing that I need you to watch in this particular situation. I need you and I to connect. One of the things we have the luxury these days we didn't always have. Some of us have been around a while. Get an audio recording and lots of video, but an audio recording of any handbell piece is online. So it's probably a good idea. I think it's definitely a good idea. I mean, you need to listen to it first to make sure that it's an acceptable version, that demo version. Usually they are. Sometimes there's ones that I might not want to play for folks, but and then let them hear that. Send that out on an email before the rehearsal, or you play in a rehearsal and everybody follows their parts. Let them hear what the piece eventually is going to sound like, so they know the goal that we're trying to reach throughout the weeks of rehearsal leading up to, and share that with our congregation. So I think that's really important to let them know what the final version is going to be like. And then again, think about yourself. You know, how are you going to get ready and be able to give your personal feelings about how you feel about the particular piece you're presenting. So you may have heard that piece done by a choir at a seminar. You may have heard it on a demo. You may be really fired up about it. Tell them that I heard this group do it and it blew me away, and I think we can do this. And this is why I'm playing this piece. Why are we playing this piece? Well, it fits this in our liturgy. This is the time that we're need to do this, that, or the other, and so give them the reason why you are programming that particular piece. All right, I am on the second page of, I don't know if these actually have numbers on them. I guess they do. Where it says assignments. And we touched on it a little bit in the last class, so some of this will be a repeat. In fact, this section I think is copied. Next couple sections are. But one of the unique things we do with this instrument is assign musicians to instruments, and that changes. So think about our other musical art forms and our choral groups and our orchestras and our bands, and you pretty much playing what instrument you're playing from day one, right? Through day N when you're in the group. You're a trumpet player. You're going to play the trumpet part. Well, maybe it's trumpet 1, trumpet 2. There's not the same concept of assigning the parts of the bell instrument to the members, to the musicians in the group. There's nothing else quite like that. So it's something that we take on as directors. That's a very involved thing in our preparation that we don't really see in other instruments. So we got to spend time. We got to think about. There's some ideas for those of you who are a little bit new to this, about the kind of numbers that we might want. That's general statements. You can certainly do more. You can make do with a little bit less too. So, but sort of the number of ringers you need. And some of the have below on how to put people in spots. You know, we always, as we look at those scores, again, if there's 3 in a row, we gotta solve those problems. You know, we got to look at, you know, where bells are shared, where bells might need to be passed. As I said in the last session, I find it very important. And a lot of these things I'm going to share with you today are lessons that I learned over the years, that improvements we made or things that changed based on lessons we learned. But I would suggest using some system for position numbers, so that when you do those markings in your score of, you know, pass a bell to a person, it's not written in your score with that person's name. It's written with a position number. I have the example of what we use. P1 is C4, D4, et cetera, up the table. And people do different things below P1. We do P0, P -1 for the lower octaves. People do PA or PA, PB, or B for bass 1, bass. But I like the fact that the system starts at the 3-octave range, so it applies to most groups. Some high percentage, I would have to be in the high 90s, I think, of every handbell group is a minimum of 3 octaves. So that fits, you know, 3, 4, 5, and up. You know, so that's a position number that I use, and make sure the ringers know that from day one. And when they do put stuff in their score, use those numbers and not people's names. That's a lesson learned over the years, that, you know, your music is often brought back in a future year, right? You put it back in the file after you played it this year, but 5, 6, 7 years from now, you pull that piece back out, and you want to take advantage of all the work that was done 5 years ago to work out those hard passages. So those hard passages, the things you've written down, hopefully are understood when you look at it, like position numbers. You know what they are. We talked earlier about a consistent way of certain things you mark. So Don Alleluia, who you know, really was the godfather of handbells in this country, and really responsible for the growth of the instrument, you know, used to have a system for bell changes where you'd circle the bell, put an arrow down, says that bell came out of your hand. At the end of the arrow, it said that what that bell or that hand became. D hand became a D sharp, and so forth. But whatever it is, it doesn't have to be that. It just has to be consistent, so that when you pick up that score and you're in a different ringing position in 5 years, those hieroglyphics that are on the score will make sense to you, and you can, you know, pretty quickly, because we always are wanting to get, you know, progress as quickly as possible, pretty quickly get to a solution. Now, you assuming a new position in 5 years, you may say, there's a better way to do that. And that's totally fine, and that's great. And I love that problem-solving thing that happens within the ringers. But at least we have a way to start. Here's a solution. We've made it work back 5 years ago. Let's go do that. Then refine that and find a better solution that maybe is more predictable. But those notes that you put in the score for those tough sections are really, really important. Talked about, you know, 4 and 5. Once you get outside of 3 octaves, you've got extra things to think about. Bass ringers, you know, there are bell assignments generally. I mean, we've all suggested where to split it in the bass, but I say every piece is different. You know, have your ringers do it in the most predictable, you know, the highest percentage, where we achieve the highest percentage of success. So we need to be careful with our groups that we're not, you know, that no one's trying to be a superstar. You know, I can do this passage where there's 6 bells in front of me, but I do it about 1 every 5 times. there's really nothing to prove. Again, as I said, you've been a part of this group. We're not kicking you out. There's no other awards that you get for being, the ringer of the year and so forth. So move those bells around. Have have a neighbor help you, because if that chance of success goes from 20% to 95%, we all benefit from that. We all want to be proud of what we present. And we want that confidence when we step in front. If it's that kind of success rate, you're going to step up and you're going to nail it. And again, as much as you can do beforehand to look at passages and figure out those assignments, figure out where the tough passages, who can throw a bell to this person, who can do this, that, just because our rehearsal time is so precious that if we start thinking about, well, let's just try this and maybe we could do this, and we get in all those discussions, we lose all kinds of time. And we really want every minute we want to use while we're in that rehearsal time. All right, so now I am ready to jump into the second section, which is things that happen at or during a rehearsal itself. And again, if there are any questions, throw them out there. Okay. So, and again, this is the other section that's duplicated a little bit from what we just talked about in our previous session about starting a bell choir. But these are the things, especially at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the season, the beginning of your time with your group, the kind of exercises that you want to think about. The hardest thing we do in handbells, I think, is playing precisely together. Every clapper hitting at the same time. You're at a little bit of a disadvantage if you move people around and change positions like I do, like we do in the Raleigh Ringers, because the weight of the bells change and so forth. But again, we do a lot of rehearsing and a lot of muscle memory kicks in. But getting those clappers to hit precisely together, it's a small point in time, and it's so easy to be off. And when we are off, we need to not accept that. We need to say, strive for playing so precisely together. So that precision ringing, practice at the beginning of the year, uniform ringing. So, everybody has a little bit of a variation in their stroke, and everybody teaches a little bit differently. Now you're reading how he taught that elliptical kind of shape and that circular shape. We don't, in the Raleigh Ringers, sometimes ring as high as some folks as far as the stroke, but the bell's always in motion, and it's that simple, that seems effortless kind of stroke that we do. So when we have people that join our group that have been in other groups that have a different teaching style, then we've got to do some adjustments. So we got to look at that uniform ringing, and we've got to get ringers to be aware of when they are outside of that uniform look. So peripherally, can you tell that your stroke is a little higher than everybody else, or can you tell that you are stiff compared to what everybody's doing? So get them to see that without having to look at a score of music. They're looking up, looking at you, but also peripherally, they're checking out their neighbors. And even though we have maybe some different heights, are my circles about where my neighbors are? Maybe I need to adjust. Maybe I'm, too fast and then slowing down at the end. The speed and the height and everything about that stroke, we want to be as consistent as possible. One of the things we try really hard to do, and some of you may have been to Raleigh Ringer concerts or seen us before online or something, is not really draw attention to one particular ringer. If their style's different than everybody else, we try to work real hard to rein them in a little bit and bring them into what is the look of everyone. There's exceptions to that. We do, a Raleigh Ringer concert includes some lighter stuff, I would say, some fun stuff where we goof around a little bit and balance that with some of the more serious original music that we like to present as well. So we'll sometimes our bass ringers will do goofy things and so forth, just kind of just delight in the moment. But in general, when we're playing a serious piece of music, I don't want everybody in the audience, or you don't want everybody in your congregation to be drawn to watching that one person. So it turns into like a solo accompanied by the rest of the group, if they are, you know, very different in their approach to this. So not everybody shares that view, but we try really hard to not to have kind of a zone that we bring in and not kind of ring outside that. So we're all looking somewhat consistent. So so we talked about precision ringing, precision damping together. That's obvious. Coordination and bell switches. So, you know, practice, especially if you're in the bass. Weaving, which some of you I'm sure know about weaving. And when you have to play multiple bells, more than 2 bells, and you have to go up and down a line, how do you do that as musically as possible? You know, it involves table damping, which sometimes involves, you know, a different damping sound, that whomping sound and so forth. But, you know, how can you minimize that? And just how can you make that comfortable and not too frantic? And then the other word in that list of exercises is legato ringing. You know, Don Ayred taught, and I think one of the first things that we do wrong when we play handbells is giving a note its full value. So when I'm in front of a larger group and we're just doing some of the warm-up exercises that get started, you know, we'll take 2 bells, play a whole note with your left hand, a whole note with your right hand. It's not LV, it's normal damping, you know, an R in your music, if you will. And I'll observe around the room, and the large percentage of the people in the room that damp that bell early. So you really have to get the feel for damping your bell on your shoulder when the other bell rings, when you're alternating those whole notes. It comes right into your shoulder. The temptation right away when you do that exercise is to damp the first bell a little earlier to get ready for that next thing. It's human nature. You got to get that done to do this thing. Got to get that done to do this thing. Well, what does that do? All of a sudden, you got a little space between those notes, and you know, that's one of the criticisms we get in handbells is, you know, you can't really play music, you know, the legato patterns because we got all this choppiness. I mean, we do criticism we get a lot, and you heard me in the other session talk about, you know, we give a handbell choir a malleted piece, you know, a pluck piece, stop sounds, they'll nail it more times than not. Give a handbell choir a lyric, more sensitive, expressive piece, and we struggle more. And that's where we get kind of beat up a little bit in handbells, is that, yeah, you can do, you know, and it's the nature of what we got. We got a percussive instrument here. So, so teach your ringers about legato ringing, something that has evolved in the Raleigh Ringers over the years. And the way you achieve that kind of feeling, and we'll talk about that some in the musicality class, which I think is next, but damp a little late. So I talked about that precision damping, damp on 1 on those whole notes, exactly when the other note plays. When you're playing a musical phrase in the treble bells, let's say, in a very exposed line, if you do that precision damping, chances are it'll sound a little choppy, and then we'll get beat up again for not being able to play a musical line as well as other instruments. So damp a little late. And it's a hard thing to start doing because you've been trained. Oh, this bell's got to stop right now on the downbeat. Boom. Now you're saying into the first beat a little bit. Just kind of fold that into your shoulder. Roll it into your shoulder a little bit. And don't zip it all out right on the downbeat, but take a second and do it late. All of a sudden, yeah, you worry, oh my gosh, that one note is bleeding into the next. Is that a problem? No, you're actually creating a connected line. Don't let it go, you know, for many beats, but just the beginning of that next beat, roll it into your shoulder so that we now have the feeling of a legato line, and practice that. That's what in this section, exercises with you. Let your ringers hear. I mean, sometimes you got to demonstrate this stuff because the ringers are like, yeah, my director says that, but I don't really believe it. I just do what they say, whatever. Show them whenever you can. Show them why you're doing something, and show them the difference before and after you're teaching them something. So they go, I really agree we got to do this, not just because my director told me, but because I heard the difference, and I want to create as much of a musical performance as possible. So anyhow, that's what I got under the whole exercises thing. Now let's talk a little bit about, flow of the rehearsals and what kinds of approaches we might use during that time when we actually are getting into the music after some of the exercises we do at the beginning. So, and these are all little points that I think, I think are important. Not, they're interspersed little tidbits. I'm not going to read every one of them, but I do think that first item is key. So as you're working with your group, give them an idea why you are playing that particular piece. Why is this in my folder? Are we playing this sometime? What, and have kind of, so oftentimes handbell groups participate in handbell festivals. And maybe you're trying to learn these 5 pieces for a handbell festival. That's why these 5 pieces are in your music or in your folder. And each month we're going to try to, contribute one of those pieces to worship. By the time we're done with those 4 or 5 pieces, we will be ready for the festival. So our long-term goal is to be as prepared as possible as I go into that handbell festival that happens in late May or sometime. But as we start in January, we're kind of curious about why we got all this music in here. Well, this month we're doing, piece A. Next month, we're doing 2 of these pieces because there's a special Sunday that they want all this music, and, tell them that. It's not big secret, but we oftentimes as directors, and I'm sure I'll get to this later, it's somewhere in here, and that goes to that goes to how you run each little piece of rehearsal. So I find myself, as I prepared this class a while ago, but when I first did it, these are all things that I used to do wrong, and I still do wrong sometimes, and I got to correct myself. But, one of the things about some of the specifics as you get into a piece is you tell your ringers, okay, we went through that. You got to, I'm pretty bad about not having a poker face, so I got, a bad looking face that something didn't go well. And I just say, guys, we got to go back to measure 32. Ready, set, go. And we do measure 32. And the same thing happened again. And I'm even more disgusted and mad. And oh my gosh, we're never going to get that, blah, blah, blah. But guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to tell them why we went to 32. I thought it was obvious. Measure 35 was not good at all because we weren't getting our switches and, all this stuff. But I never told them that. They just knew, go back to 32 and go do it again. No input on why. So as much information as you can give them about why you're doing what you're doing, share it. It's not secret. I'll be honest with them sometimes, and it's very, very selfish of me, but I want to go back to the beginning and play the whole piece. And ringers, I will tell you, you did a fantastic job the last time. I love the piece and I wanted to hear it again. This is totally selfish. This is for me. I'm kind of the director, so I get to make these calls. So I love the piece and it hit me in a certain way. I want that again, kind of thing. So there are times that, maybe there isn't a deep technical reason why we're doing something again, but just for repetition, but sometimes just for me. Other things about the rehearsal that I have under there, don't just play through the music, start at measure 1, go through the end. Sometimes we do that when we first introduce a piece, and even if there's a train wreck or 2, we want to touch every measure. But as we jump into a piece that's somewhere in progress, tell them, guys, last week that middle section didn't cut it. It was falling apart. Our confidence wasn't there. Why I'm bringing this piece back up, we're going to jump right to that middle section and see if there's a better way to handle this key change. Can somebody take some bells? Can somebody, do we just need to do it a couple times and it'll improve because of, muscle memory or whatever. So, we run in the, we're all busy and we're in rehearsal, we're getting there late and we're just like running through music beginning to end. Okay, do this piece beginning to end. Did we really do anything? So we want to try to have little goals of, I want to get this part better. These parts that we then nail, that was really hard. We finally got it. Do it every time, every rehearsal. That piece, you guys got it last week. I'm going to go to that middle section. Let's see if we still got it. Nailed it. Good. We're still in good shape. Or did it regress? Sometimes when we meet once a week, that's a lot of time that things, a lot of things went through our brains and through our lives that, we're back to some bad habits. So let's make sure we're at least where we were last week, if not, on the way to improving. And there's my, communicate why you are stopping, what didn't happen. That's what I mentioned earlier. Allow them to help problem solve. Again, I think, the more that the onus is on the ringers to help figure out, yes, you do your initial. A lot of times you're not behind the table and they got a better answer. That's great. Because you know what? They will be proud of that. They figured out a better answer and they'll make it happen every time because it was theirs. They came up with that. And by gosh, I had they like thinking I had a better answer than the director, so they're a little bit cocky about that too. So, but they're going to nail it every time because it was their idea. You've all worked with people that it works out so much better if it was their idea. So when that happens, it's awesome. I have some times there for rehearsals, very roughly for kids and for, more advanced groups. If you can get a 2-hour rehearsal in, that's fantastic. 1.5 is probably good for a lot of groups, and more than some would want to do. And oftentimes we just have to do an hour, and some of that we don't have is out of our control. We only have the rehearsal area for a certain amount of time. So I understand that too. And again, I mentioned earlier, use familiar pieces at the end of the rehearsal so they go home with some great confidence. Have the rehearsal area ready when the ringers arrive. This is very, very important. If your rehearsal is, we deal with an instrument with a lot of logistics, a lot of junk we got, right? We got tables, some of you may have situations where you have your bells set up all the time. Raleigh Ringers didn't for a lot of years. We have a building now, so the tables are set up. We get bells out of cases, but we used to have to, 45 minutes before, 45 minutes after, close up bells in the retirement and take them down the hall, take them down elevators. It was a huge process. But the point is, if your rehearsal starts at 7, that's the downbeat of the rehearsal. So I would try as best you can, whether it's you personally. I think it's better if some of the ringers assume some of that responsibility. I think they should feel some ownership of some of those tasks that have to happen. But whoever does it, it should be done at the 7 o'clock downbeat. You should start. And I think I got something in here later about attendance, but if everybody's not there at 7, start at 7. Start at 7. It's horrible because we got holes in the bell choir and so forth. I mean, but you should do your best to start at 7. As soon as you allow the rehearsal to go 5 minutes late every week, the folks that do come right on time are not gonna bother. I know he's not going to start till 5 after anyhow, because these people are always late and he lets them be late, So when you do start at 7 and the other people come in, I wouldn't be shy about letting them know that, is there anything we can do about getting you here on time next week? And again, that comes from you, but it's almost more valuable when the ringer next to that person said, man, I really missed having you. I wanted to work on that passage and you weren't there. And I feel like it's gotten worse because you weren't there. So, you could call a little bit of a guilt trip or whatever, but as soon as you let them know it's acceptable to waltz in late, you've lost that discipline about starting on time. So I think that's really important. Checking time. We still got good time. Have a plan for every rehearsal. And, I have a whiteboard in behind me when I direct the group that I post what our final set list is going to be for our next tour. And I haven't started that this year. We've only had a couple of rehearsals, but I oftentimes give some, like some grades to those pieces and where they are in the process. So with the goal of being a 5-star piece and being ready to go and it's concert ready, this piece is only 1 star. This is 1.5 star. We still got work to do on this one. It's not concert ready yet, kind of thing. So I try to give them an idea of the progress we're making towards that goal of having these, 11, 12, 14 pieces concert ready with 100% confidence so that they know, oh gosh, we got a lot ahead of us. I might want to take my notebook home this week and do some extra work or come to the building and bring my neighbor, who rings right next to me with me and work out these parts so that I can help get us to closer to 5-star. So yeah, master plan for the whole season. We already talked about it a little bit. Spend a little bit of time talking about electronic devices. Everybody's got one. It's an important lifeline for us these days. So understand it's a big deal. We had issues in our group where, folks, ringers complain about not having enough space on the table for all the things we do. We have extra bell sets. This morning in our session, I brought some of them home with me. I showed some of these weird bells we own, all these unique sets of Pettit and Fritzens and Silver Melody bells and Deegan bells and all this stuff. And some songs we use a lot of them. And I hear a little bit of whining about, I don't have enough room on the table. Why did we have to dedicate real estate to having the cell phone on the table so you could watch, any text messages go by? Is that crucial, right? So you can't have it both ways. So when Bill Payne came in to do an event for us, we call Virtuoso, the first year he did that, which is an intense 3-day event for ringers around the country that, we'll be doing our 5th one of those this June, again, pushed out from the pandemic. But he was black and white about cell phone policy. Don't have it on you. You have it on your body, your person. I'm going to call you out. Have it back in your coat or your purse where you left that. Don't even have it nearby. What he does in his choral group, he did in his choral group at Bucknell, when you took your folder out of the hole, your music folder, you put your iPad, your whatever, your phone, whatever it is that any electronic device that's on you, it goes in that cubby hole. And then when you're done with rehearsal, you put your music back and you take your electronic device. And if you don't follow that policy, first time he catches you, he said he only did it like once or twice, I think. Because he was very stern about that and people understood and just followed it. But if you don't do it, your grade goes from an A to a B. No questions asked, no way to recover, done. You got it on you, whatever. Now, when he came and told that to the Virtuoso folks, Raleigh ringers were listening to, and I'm like, I'm going to establish that same policy. We were having trouble. I don't think I was tough enough on it. So we do that too. You can't have your cell phone on you. We do, though, allow exceptions. If you come to me before rehearsal and you've got, a child coming back from college and you want to make sure she got there or going to college, we had a few, and she's going to text you that she got there and you want to just, tell me beforehand. If that happened every week, I I'd question it. But really, as on exception basis, if you got somebody in the hospital, you got bad stuff going on, you need to check on something. That's cool. But tell me beforehand, because I've called people out and they go, well, I got this thing. You just got to tell me, that kind of thing. But become a big part of our lives these days. So try not to let it get, because, when you get to that distraction and you're on your phone, you're not paying attention to what's going on, even if they're not working on your part. And all of a sudden, you missed a big message that came out. And it just doesn't help. And most of the things we're checking, are not important. They can wait, right? Just like the phones in the car deal, it can wait. All right, enough on that. I already talked about marking music, establishing standards with using the position numbers and so forth. So this next section is on leadership. So I want to spend some time here, you as a leader, and what folks expect, what the ringers expect out of our leaders, and what we expect out of our ringers in terms of leadership. So what we as a leader, we want to develop within each ringer. You can read this list, but you want them to be there. You want them, there's something I have later in this handout. I'm jumping around a little bit, but talk about recruiting members. The best recruiting tool you can possibly have is somebody out in the pews was just awestruck with what you did, whether that would cause an emotional reaction, cause something within them. It was one of those moments that is unexplainable, that they were touched and they want to be part of that. It came from them. We have the hardest time, I think, in succeeding when somebody's in the bell choir because somebody else wants you to be in the bell choir. And it's not all part of you. So oftentimes those are family members. Us as directors, we're like, well, my wife, my kids are going to sub this week. They don't really want to be here, but we got to fill the spot. And, their heart's not in it, right? It just doesn't go as well as you wanting to be there. So you want people to want to be there. They're not there for somebody else. They want to be proud of what they do and proud that they got in the group and that they're members of the group and that they're part of the bell choir for this semester, season, or whatever. You got to be willing to work. So sometimes outside of rehearsals. So when you sign up for the bell choir, the expectation shouldn't be that just Wednesday nights you open those folders and then you put them away and you come back on Wednesday nights and we can't make the progress that we need to make. So you got to work a little bit outside, listen to those demo recordings, get familiar with the piece, use spoons at home to do individual rehearsing, whatever. If you can't bring the bells home or you can't come to the church to get a hold of the bells, there's other ways to work through those things. Work hard. Don't be there at rehearsal to catch up with your buddies that you hadn't seen in a week. Yeah, we end up working so hard as a bell choir. We do become connected socially as well. I mean, you just can't help it. But try to save the conversation, favorite TV show that you saw last night before or after rehearsal when you're cleaning up the bells and putting things away and so forth, and or out in the hall after rehearsal. I mean, try not to use the time during rehearsal to catch up that way. All right, I think that's most of what we're looking to develop in each ringer. You as a director, and these are my thoughts, and these are not just bell thoughts. These are things I've in my IT career and other things that I've done, and things that have really made me admire a leader. And what I try to emulate, and I not always. You got to be firm, but you got to have a little bit of flexibility, I think. So firm, not rigid. You gotta make sure when it comes to the final call, you're the one making the call, but we can't be always closed off to others' ideas. If they got a suggestion, listen, explain why we might not do it that way, but don't just close right off or you'll lose folks. The example that I have about You know, let the ideas, there's time and a place for folks to offer their suggestions and ideas, right? We all have members in our group. If we were sitting together in a conference room setting, you'd probably all smile at this point when I say this, but we always have members of our group that are more vocal than others, that feel the need to say things when we didn't ask them to contribute at that particular time. I'm trying to be really nice here. And, you know, sometimes that causes a little bit of harm when those interjections happen. One of the examples I like to cite is when we bring out a new piece as a director. We put it in front of everybody. We just heard that at a convention, a seminar, somewhere, and we were so excited about how that piece hit you that you couldn't wait to play it, to bring it and put it in front of the group and start playing it. And of course, you know it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be wonderful that first time, but you're excited, you're motivated, you just play through the piece, and that vocal ringer that we talked about, as soon as the last note is hit and we cut it off, she or he says, "Man, I hate that." For everybody to hear. You got a whole group of people, many of which are willing to go with you as a director and are ambivalent about what you need to provide. But you heard this person offered that opinion, and now others are going, "Yeah, you know, you're right. That was pretty awful." And it just deflated all that excitement that you had and you brought to that piece. So for me, that's something that after rehearsal I addressed with that ringer head on. Don't let that go anymore. That said, you know, there's times you can tell me personally what you feel about a piece or whatever, but there's other times when I really don't want you to provide that feedback. And that was one of them. When you did that, I could see other people coming down with you. So, you know, end of the season, you want to, people offer ideas for, I played this piece in this, let me, you know, whatever, and give suggestions. But once you establish what you're playing for the year, things like that are your decisions to make, and you're going with them. So don't let those vocal people, you know, influence and possibly bring down a rehearsal with some of that. Be decisive. Realize that this is a good one, that your attitudes and mannerism dictates a group performance. If you've had a bad day as a director and you come, you try as best you can to wipe that out, but it shows. You're looking at your clock. You don't want to be there. You're huffing and puffing, and, you know, that comes across to the ringers, and they're not going to work hard. They're like, you don't want to be here, I guess I don't want to be here. So keep in mind that bleeds right through to them. You know, the other thing as a leader, you know, again, something to keep in mind, we do have personal connections oftentimes with members of our group. They're really good friends or members of our family or whatever. But we need to be careful that, you know, you really don't have to, you know, if you're going to work towards improvements and doing the things you're going to do some hard things. So you're going to ask people to change positions because it's not working out and so forth. And they're going to whine about that. And you're going to feel like, man, they don't like me, you know, some of those things. So just know that you're the leader of the handbell group, and it really does not, you know, does not have to do with some of those other things. There's some steps there. Ideas of, you know, what you can do to become a better leader. I think, you know, study leaders that have a great influence on your life. You know, choose music that you love. Be fired up like you were when you brought that new piece to the group that you heard someone else play that was so good. You're going to make it work because you know what it can be. Sometimes we just kind of quickly choose, like, oh, I guess we got to do this one again, and it wasn't your favorite piece or whatever. It's not going to be as good as you want it to be versus that other piece that was like, you knew what it did to you. Let's try to see if we can bring that same emotion to the group presenting it to the church. And yeah, I say be hard, be firm, be decisive. But I also think taking a personal interest in your group, understanding if somebody's going through something, family illness, job stuff or whatever, understand that, talk to them a little bit, be compassionate with that, be understanding of that, so that it's not such a wall that you are the director, they're the ringers, and what you say goes, blah, blah, blah. Connect with them in that way so you can be understanding of those things. I didn't have a good rehearsal tonight because guess what happened at work today? And they told you that, and you sympathize. You chat with them, and that means a lot to them, that you listened and that you connected with them, and that we both understand together that was a one-time deal. It's probably going to be better next week, but this thing at work that happened just brought me down, and I didn't want to be here tonight. And those times will happen. Those times will happen for all of us. All right, going on to my last page, and hopefully we'll still have a little bit of time if you guys got some questions. This is so hard without interaction. I really like doing this when we can talk. So, but this is what it is. So look at that ringer expectation section. Some characteristics that I think are important, what you bring to the group in that first item. Make sure that attendance is their responsibility. In the last class, he was asking about substitutes. I think it's really good. We all know people at other churches. I assume we mainly know people at other churches that have handbell choirs, that have ringers that would love to ring more. We only rehearse once a week. We play once a month in church. I want to do more. And so develop a substitute list of some of these, fanatical ringers that want to do more, that are good sight readers and so forth, and share that between churches. Or maybe there's other members of your church that can't commit to the whole bell season, but are and potentially good ringers. Develop a list that you've kind of approved to share with your ringers, and these are the approved substitutes. And make that be the ringer's responsibility to acquire that sub, and don't let them drop that in your lap day of rehearsal to go have to scramble and find someone. So that's their job. And I say approved list because I've experienced that before, where I've said, okay, it's your job, go find somebody. And it was kind of the warm body thing. So the person hadn't ever played handbells before, wasn't really that great a musician, back in the church choir, very nice person. But in all honesty, it would have been better to have an empty position than all the time we spent, working through that with an inexperienced person. So the approved sub list, I think, is a vital thing, and making them do the work, letting them understand. And maybe if it's hard, I had to call 3 different people and I had to twist this person's arm and blah, blah, blah. Maybe next time that conflict they had, they'll work it out, because they know, man, I don't want to go do that, find that sub thing again. That was a hard thing to do. And again, we mentioned that several times. Don't do anything take away from rehearsal time. We talked about starting on time, the talking, the playing bells. Here's the other thing. I've heard directors say, and appreciate the discipline rather than a wide open just chit chat session. But I've heard directors say, we don't talk in our rehearsals. No talking. Silence. So between, when we stop, silence. And I think that's a bit over the top, because I want people to work out things when something when we had a little bit of a train wreck, I want them to talk about it. So you as a director need to discern. It can't go on forever, but you need to discern when you hear a conversation going on. Are they productive? Are they working something out about that? Is there some problem solving going on here? I want that to happen. Not too long. And then again, when they solve their own problems, it's so much better. It's so much better than you dictating an answer to what just happened. So you have to be, I think you don't have to be that hard-nosed about no talking ever. That we got to communicate. We're working as a team to get to our final goal here. And the teamwork that happens to solve a problem and then it succeeds, that feeds on itself and can be a really positive thing. So just another point I want to make. All right. So, everything doesn't have to fall on you. I said that earlier about setting up, tearing down, so forth. Some of this is, maybe more for community groups that we have a lot of different, but if you're traveling and there's other things you need to do when you're going to this festival, somebody can set up the hotel reservation, somebody can get the church van, somebody can, organize how we're going to carpool. And, you don't have to do everything. Delegate some of that stuff, make them have some ownership of some of that stuff. And again, I said earlier, what's the best recruiting tool? A group that plays really well. All right. So in the end, the final part of this is the part that we often skip. We go home from rehearsal exhausted. It didn't go well. And we just want to wipe it out of our minds. It was like, oh man, not only did I have a bad day at work, it was not a great rehearsal. And, I'm going to go to bed early and tomorrow's a new day kind of thing. And next week, the same thing happens. We didn't take the time to look at why did that not go so well? What things could I have done better? I should have spent more time on this piece. Next week, take notes, write it down. Next week, we got to do, from a week-long break between rehearsals, I forget stuff. So I got to write stuff down. What things could I have helped along the way? What could have some of the ringers helped? And how can I encourage them? Maybe I should have asked them to bring the music home. Maybe I still should suggest that. Maybe they need a sectional. That's one thing we don't do in handbells. We do it in other instruments. Let's have a sectional. Bring the bass back early. Bring the treble. Come early next week. Find a time between the three of you to get together and work on that part. And totally delegate it to them. You lead it. The more times you delegate little tasks, you think you're not doing your job sometimes, and I'm letting them do my job. What you're actually doing is creating more ownership. I do bass bell assignments. I let people do my bass bell assignments because it's the hardest kind of part of the assignments that we do. Each bass piece needs to be analyzed, and I give that to different ringers, and they love when I ask them to do it because they want to do good assignments and succeed and say, I nailed that. Just like when they want to play well. So, all of those things we need to think about. I have sectionals individual. We don't, because bells reside at the church or at whatever organization, we don't do enough individual rehearsals. And do things between those Wednesday nights. Call your ringers, meet with them. Don't make it just a Wednesday night thing. So